Hello student, welcome to the lecture on cultural dimensions of IHRM, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Understand elements of culture, discuss the Laurent study of culture, describe the cross-culture communication, understand the culture and HR functions, explain the determinants of culture.
I often get the question, what is culture? There are various definitions of what culture is, but there's one in particular which I find most interesting. Hofstede's definition of culture is the following. Culture is the collective programming of the mind, distinguishing the members of, let's say, one group or category of people from others. Inherently, I believe that we're all programmed to think in a certain way. To view things from a certain perspective and to judge what is wrong or what is right. This programming consists of past experiences, upbringing, our surroundings, values, beliefs, and even emotions, which act as a lens for us to interpret the world that we see around us. Culture is both visible and not visible, or maybe you could say intangible. And I could also even break down culture into three main, let's say, layers. The first being national culture. National culture is the culture that we as people from a certain country or region share together. And national culture is often ingrained in us from an early age and is very hard to change. So the next level of culture is organizational culture. And organizational culture is a collection of behaviors, mannerisms, assumptions, and values shared amongst the majority of people within an organization and set by the most dominant group of an organization. Organizational culture can easily be learned and unlearned. So say you go from one company to another, you easily adapt to the next company's culture, whereas you can maybe be in the same industry, but the culture among these two different companies are very different. And lastly, culture at the personal level is based on personality and identity, and depends on the individual's beliefs, basic assumptions, values, and behaviors.
Let's start with the perspectives and approaches of IHRM. In modern organizational theory, the issue of culture has received a prominent position in factoring the different drivers of competitive advantage. Culture exists in several layers affecting both the inside and the outside of an organization and has the potential of affecting a company both positively and negatively. Culture is somewhat prone to change and can be influenced. Culture can be defined as the crystallization of history in the thinking, feeling, and acting of the present generation. Culture is a characteristic of a particular group of people defined by everything from language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and arts. Elements of culture. There are various visible cultural artifacts that one cannot easily use for the purpose of holistic cultural comparisons. The classic example is meaning. Some may be so culture specific as to be incomparable quantitatively across many societies. Symbols, another group of particular elements of culture, are closely associated with them. So can be rituals and even heroes, which may also be considered as components of culture. Taboos are another example of particular elements of culture. Universal elements of culture. The following parts are devoted to elements of culture that are assumed to have a universal nature and can be measured holistically, at least across modern societies, but often across pre-literate ones as well. Self-reports. Self-reports are the most common outcome of paper and pencil studies in holistic cross-cultural analysis. These are statements that respondents make about themselves. Values. Values are an important element of culture, as social behavior is viewed as partly caused by dominant values and ideologies. An early and pioneering study of managers' values based on Abraham Maslow's concept was carried out by Harry, Ghazali, and Porter, covering 11 countries. Norms and ideologies. Norms or ideologies are also an important cultural phenomenon. They are often studied together with other elements of culture. Artifacts. Artifacts are the physical things that are found that have particular symbolism for a culture. They may even be endowed with mystical properties. These can also be more everyday objects such as the bunch of flowers in reception. Ritual, rites, ceremonies, celebrations. Rituals are processes or sets of actions which are repeated in specific circumstances and specific meaning. Whatever the circumstance, the predictability of the rituals and the seriousness of the meaning all combine to sustain the culture. Attitudes. Attitudes are the external displays of underlying beliefs that people use to signal to other people of their membership. Convergence of culture. The word cultural refers to the things, ways of thinking, patterns of behavior, values that are common to a group of people and which makes them different from any other group. The word convergence refers to the trend toward each other between any numbers of items. Convergence is commonly used today for the integration of technologies, global standards, entertainment patterns, etc. A movement. Cultural convergence refers to a movement in every key aspect of local and global societies. This movement seeks to lessen the tensions between groups from different cultural backgrounds. One approaches cultural convergence in encouraging each culture to become aware of how other cultural resources might be the catalyst for a rebuild of one's own culture. Cultural enrichment. In cultural enrichment, the individual may choose to expand their own cultural awareness and behaviors by learning from the experiences and insights of other cultures. The word convergence in our uses means opportunities for cultural enrichment. No loss of one's own culture. There may be a tendency to interpret the word convergence as meaning some kind of loss of unique character of any one of the cultures involved. On the contrary, we wish to stress that the more one gets involved in intercultural interaction, the more one is likely to become aware of and even enhance one's own cultural programming. Determinants of culture. Culture is a dynamic and adaptive system of meaning that is learned, shared and transmitted from one generation to the next and is reflected in the values, norms, practices, symbols, ways of life and other social interaction of a given culture. Culture affects perception about illness, including how patients express and manifest their symptoms, their styles of coping, their families and community supports, and their willingness to seek treatment. The influence of culture is evident on how people eat, work, conduct them, seek care and react to health, promoting or compromising messages. Culture also shapes their constructs on diagnostic characteristics and syndromes. Culture may hold explanatory powers of variable strengths in different situations, but can also be an attractive paradigm to epidemiologists in their quest for unifying explanation for seemingly diverse situations. The logic that cultural factors are part of the wider gamut of social determinants may prove to be spacious. Role of cultural understanding. Understanding and appreciating cultural differences in business has become of vital importance to all organizations. Sensitivity and maintaining a good relationship is vital when managing a business deal. Understanding differences between your own culture and unfamiliar partners can make or break a business deal. Understanding and appreciating cultural differences is not just ensuring you avoid causing offense, however. Attitude towards business, the way they run and views on management styles can vary greatly in different cultures. Internally, effective communication is key to any organization's success, and so an appreciation of different culture is also of great importance in maintaining a professional and harmonious environment in the workplace. It is important to ensure that the increasing diversity of workplaces and the global nature of modern business is not seen as a hindrance and is turned into the positive that it can and should be. Hofstede, culture and work value. Hofstede's model is made up of 4 later 5 culture dimension, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism and masculinity, and later Confucian dynamism. These dimensions were identified by Hofstede as a result of statistical analysis of surveys involving people from 66 countries but only one multinational company. Each of the national cultures involved was assigned a score on each of the 4 original dimensions that has allowed many researchers to compare national cultures and make claims about cultural differences on the basis of such supposedly objective measures. Hofstede model. This model mainly characterizes the comprised data from 10 of the African and Middle East countries which earlier were excluded because of instability of data. The new chapters dealing with organizational culture, intercultural encounters and the application of his dimensions, and a more thoroughly explained analysis supported by 63 of his own publication and other scholars, replication, extension and validity tests on his cultural model. The model takes into consideration 5 cultural dimensions: power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, masculinity, and long-term orientation. One of the main shortcomings in Hofstede's framework is its strongly functionalist and quantitative nature, which focuses on measuring phenomena that should not and to many cannot be narrowly seen as quantifiable. Hofstede's dimensions. Hofstede's theory introducing cultural dimension for cross-culture management analysis has sparked several criticisms over the years. Power distance. Power distance is the societal desire for hierarchy. Expressed more eloquently, Hofstede defines it as power distance is the extent to which the members of a society accept that power in institution and organization is distributed unequally. Hofstede's research indicates that 2 predictors of the power distance index score which are relevant to consumer behavior are geographically and wealth. Uncertainty avoidance. The uncertainty avoidance index addresses a society's tolerance of ambiguity and uncertainty. Hofstede also found that high uncertainty avoidance index scores were correlated with extensive legislation. Individualism. According to Hofstede, individualism stands for a preference for a loosely knit social framework in society wherein individuals are supposed to take care of themselves and their immediate family only. Individualism is highly correlated with wealth. Masculinity. As stated previously, the masculinity dimension measures the preference for sex role distinctions to be made between men and women in a particular culture. Masculinity stands for a preference in society for achievement, heroism, assertiveness, and material success. Its opposite, femininity, stands for a preference for relationships, modesty, caring for the weak, and the quality of life. Hall's theory of cultural context. Anthropologist Edward T. Hall's theory of high and low context culture helps us better understand the powerful effect culture has on communication. The following summary highlights the problems facing low context North Americans when they interact with people from high context cultures. High context cultures, including much of the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and South America, are relational, collectivist, intuitive, and contemplative. This means that people in these cultures emphasize interpersonal relationship. According to Hall, these cultures are collectivist, preferring group harmony and consensus to individual achievement. Andrea Laurent's study of culture. This research by Laurent was directed to bring into focus some of the implicit management and organizational assumptions that managers are known to have. It is not so much to explore national differences. Laurent analyzed the values of managers in 9 European countries and the US in 1983 and 1989, along with Adler and Campbell, collected data on China, Indonesia, and Japan. Laurent used 4 parameters: perception of the organization, authority systems, role formulation systems, and hierarchical systems. Laurent's cross-culture study. P. Laurent tries to identify what managers perceived as being most important for career success. This led to a list of 60 criteria. National groups of managers were then asked in a systematic survey to select from among these 60 criteria those they saw as most important for career success within the firm. For American managers, the single most important criterion to have a successful career with the company was ambition, drive, and a pragmatic, individualistic, achievement-oriented assessment system. For the French, the single most important criterion was being labeled as having high potential, a more social and political reading of the same system. German managers more than others believed that creativity was essential for success. British managers hold a more interpersonal and subjective view of the organizational world. According to them, the ability to create a right image and get noticed for what they do is essential for success. French managers look at the organization as an authority network where the power to organize and control the actors stems from their positioning in the hierarchy. They focus on the organization as a pyramid of differentiated levels of power to be acquired or dealt with. A comparative analysis across cultures brings the starting evidence that the art of managing and organizing has no homeland. Cross-cultural communication. The phrase cross-cultural communication describes the ability to successfully form, foster and improve relationships with members of a culture different from one's own. It is based on knowledge of many factors such as the other culture's values, perceptions, manners, social structure and decision-making practices, and an understanding of how members of the group communicate verbally, non-verbally, in person, in writing, and various business and social contexts, to name but a few. A balanced cross-cultural training program provides participants with the knowledge, understanding and skills they need to communicate and cooperate effectively across cultural barriers. The key to effective cross-cultural communication is knowledge. First, it is essential that people understand the potential problems of cross-cultural communication and makes a conscious effort to overcome these problems. Second, it is important to assume that one's effort will not always be successful and adjust one's behavior appropriately. Often intermediaries who are familiar with both cultures can be helpful in cross-cultural communication situation. Culture and HR functions. Human resources HR. Departments play a pivotal role in setting the cultural tone of a company. The HR departments must model how they want other departments and individual employees to act to create as positive a workplace culture as possible. Two of HR's main functions are to attract and retain high-quality professionals, and the culture they promote in the company affects these functions. Communication. The HR departments that do not talk with their managers and employees on a regular basis, but instead simply issue directives and policies without consulting anyone, spread a negative feeling throughout the company. Confrontation. The HR staff members often do not like to confront employees when they do something wrong. To prevent them from disobeying company rules, they write down the rules. Publication. One of HR's major functions is to hire. When they wire and disseminate job description, the tone in which they write the description can affect how a potential candidate feels about the company. Publications that are more upbeat can help change employees' attitudes about each other and HR. Openness. When an HR department promotes itself as being open and easily approachable, it helps employees feel that HR will advocate on their behalf. Summary. Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. In working towards your diverse organization or community, there is much more to do. It has been talked about how to become aware of your own culture, build relationship with from different cultures, become allies to people discriminated against, overcome internalized oppression, build multicultural organization and coalition, and other topics as well. Each of us can build the kinds of communities we dream of in our families, organizations, institutions, and neighborhoods. We can insist that we would not remain isolated from those who are different from ourselves. We can transform our neighborhoods, institutions, and governments into equitable, non-oppressive, and diverse communities. Beyond the consideration, however, the appeal of Hofstede research lies fundamentally in the fact that countries are already categorized on dimension, not necessarily exclusive or exhaustive, but nevertheless dimensions recognized as important. For cross-cultural researchers without the necessary access to requirements like research participants, colleague connections, and the funds for the validating predictive scales on similar values of interest, Hofstede's result offers an economical way to make hypotheses about predicted results when gathering inter-country data.